Today we've got Josh Baker, owner, founder, CEO, I think still general manager of Southeast Agro Seeds out of Rome, Georgia. I'm an independent dealer for Josh. We've worked together for, according to him, almost 10 years. It'll be this summer. So very excited to have him as our inaugural guest on Around the Fencepost, and looking forward to catching up with Josh and getting some of that backstory. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Josh.
Jacob, appreciate it. Kind of an interesting way for me to kind of my introduction into forages and where I came from. So I grew up in Georgia and moved to Pennsylvania, chasing a job up there, and got connected with a company called Agro Seeds, and then really learned a lot about forages on dairy application mostly, and worked with a lot of dairymen and traveled with agronomists and seed dealers throughout the Northeast, and also worked on a dairy farm while I lived up there. And the years that I was up there, I learned a lot, and many days it was like drinking from a fire hose. But also started to realize how applicable a lot of the principles were to the Southeast and to the forage production system that I kind of grew up in and grew up familiar with, which honestly needed some help and needed some input from more progressive minds in terms of forage production. So I was excited to move back to Georgia after working with Agro Seeds. I approached the owner of King's and said, "Hey, I'd like to do what we're doing here back home in the South." So, and that's what started Southeast Agro Seeds. He and I partnered. Initially, we partnered on the business to get it started, and once things got up and rolling, I was able to take over full ownership of it and continue forward. And there's so many details, so many twists and turns and things that happened. We worked with a number of the dairies in the Southeast, and then we started to add some of the larger beef producers that we worked with, through our dealer network. And as things started to snowball, we added more staff and were able to bring on some key people in the past who really helped us build the brand, not just on the brand itself, but on service and quality and quality of products and quality of service and advice. I mean, that was the biggest thing for me. Our slogan is helping you optimize productivity on every acre. And optimizing is a word that we hang on considering inputs. We look at the input side of things and also combine our level of production and into a profitable system. That's what we've done. We came out with that tagline and said, this is the passion. This is what we want to do with this business. And since 2016, this year being our 10th anniversary, since 2016, that's what we've done and what we've pursued, working with forage producers to pursue that goal of optimizing productivity. So that's a bit of a snapshot. We operate out of Rome, Georgia. Have a warehouse space here. We just started a sub-warehouse location in North Carolina, that kind of a pilot project, and working up that way where we already have a solid base of business. And the grounds here in Georgia, we have a warehouse and about 9 acres at this facility. A few of those acres we use for test plots, and then I have a farm, my personal farm, about a half hour north of here. And of course, I'm always planning different things and trialing different products to see what works. And that's the snapshot, kind of. I mean, that's it's like I said, I can't talk about it without thinking about all the details of what has gone into it. Trials and tribulations, challenges, days where I thought, I don't know if this is going to work. And then those successful days where you see customers who try products and realize the difference in them and versus what they've been planting, or some folks have not been planting anything. It's just overall improvements to forage management. A lot of positive strides in the past 10 years, and a lot of positive interactions for sure. And excited about this next chapter too. You working with you, Jacob, to try to kind of get this up and rolling and be a resource for producers in the Southeast. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and I kind of jotting down some notes here on things I want to circle back and let you expound on a little bit further, and the quality of service and advice, and really the model. King's has done it, Byron's, all of you guys in the Kingfisher umbrella and Southeast, of course, as the now fully grown sister company to fully be.
Sorry, I had a call that came in.
Could you hear all that? Okay, so where you're now we've grown. The Southeast is now fully fully matured company and incredible to see. But let's talk about the process of bringing in the independent dealers and then improving the education of them for them to help give that advice to provide that level of service. Let's talk about that a little bit, because that is, you look at, and it's funny, I've been, of course, the forage business and social media is being what it is. And the amount of people that pop up on my suggested friends with Josh Baker as a mutual friend. And I'm like, checking their profile, and they might sell a little seed. And I'm like, wonder if they're Josh's dealer. Like, and it's people I don't know, but it's people that talk about stuff or show pictures to make me go, wow, they seem to know what they're doing really well. I need to get that connection from Josh because I want to have them on as well. There's some really smart people that you have gotten brought into the fold that have made that leap from however long in the past they might have been operating to the way they're going today. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to talk about that. I mean, I think what I've learned about folks who can sell seed is that it's really kind of critical to be a pretty good producer yourself. And when I say producer, someone who's talented at learning, plant development and understands forages, understands forage quality. I think that's very important. So there are a lot of people out there that can sell a product and are good at the sales side, but it kind of all falls apart if you don't have the agronomic understanding or the interest in understanding how these forages fit into a system with a livestock producer. So that takes time to develop. So the better seed dealers out there, the guys who are using products themselves for one, or have a good base level understanding of why these products are different than whatever their friends and neighbors have been using in the past. And once that's understood, once they see the difference in those products, and it becomes a pretty easy road for them. It's easier to explain, it's easier to showcase, and that's what makes a good seed dealer. Someone who can bring some expertise to the table, introduce some new products, and help a forage producer plug those into their system. And I think that's because we have brought folks on board like yourself who understand forages and forage systems. I think that leads to, like you were saying about social media, that leads to connections with other forage producers, like-minded folks. So, and that's where a lot of our dealers have come from recommendations from existing dealers. Hey, I know a guy, 5 counties over in the middle part of the state that is really talented and has some interest in forages. And so that's where a lot of those have come from. And because of how we present ourselves too, as a forage and cover crop seed company, we're not an ag supply, ag distributor type company. We can't sell you everything you need to manage your farm. I don't want to. I have no interest in that. But if you're looking for high quality forage and cover crop seed, we can do that. We're not getting distracted with turf and erosion control type products. We do sell some of those things as a byline, as a side item. But if you look at our manuals, our booklets, our website, our price sheets, everything points to forages and cover crops. So I think by really being focused on our target audience and who we feel like we can help, that's attracted a good base of dealers, a good dealer network.
That's a really good, that was a really good piece there and then when you just started talking about the turf and forage and it not being a priority, and I started thinking, well, it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power there to just put Kentucky 31 or a turf grass variety. But what I was going to say was on our vendor side, we deal with you have several different vendors that you bring in seed from, trying to find the best species to grow and to benefit the South. I think that's such a big thing, and it's almost funny where we have the back and forth with our neighbors to the north where they'll have all these products, and we're having to remind people that maybe move to the South, hey, that doesn't quite work the same way here. And you working in Pennsylvania, of course, had to deal with that same situation. And me growing up for the first 13 years, 7 of which we were grazing cows, we had to relearn forage when we moved to Tennessee. And you probably did a bit, because I don't know what you were familiar with from Georgia, but before you went up there. But I'm sure you had to kind of try a few things before we got really comfortable saying that this variety works really good, or this species is really good in the South. And specifically, I'm thinking about a couple of our tall fescues that are from DLF and different things like that. And, you know, to your point about the turf grass, there's other vendors that have very much leaned that way in their
Sure.
product selection.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's a good point. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. You're going to ask a question there.
Well, I was going to just go a little more with the product and what helps you make that decision on some of these before, or do you always run plots or trials on them before you start getting something in?
Yeah, well, so can we walk and talk a little bit? Because I'm actually sitting here. I'm in my pickup right beside in my
Yeah,
truck right
you are
beside
good.
the plots here.
I can.
So I might do that. So one of the, so screening products is pretty important. We do rely on some of our suppliers to help us screen some products. In general, forage testing is less of a priority in the Southeast as it is in other regions. Dairy, in a lot of regions, dairy production really drives forage testing, both from a quality and agronomic standpoint. But we do, we'll run some products through OVT trials, but truthfully, we do a lot more of testing here, testing on my farm, and then testing through our dealer network and on-farm trials, touching, seeing how the products perform, seeing how they react in a controlled scale. So obviously, I don't want to say, hey, this is a new variety, so let's set it a little cheaper than our existing variety, get a bunch of it out in the marketplace and see what the response is. That would not be good, right? So we test these products through the dealer network, make some quantity available to them, and they run trials and plots just like we do. But I'll step out of the truck and show you what we've got here. So we have a couple acres that are sorted.
Can you hear me okay? You may not have enough service to where I can catch. I'm not sure if you have enough service there, Josh. I can't hear you.
Extension centers that actually have cattle still. Can you hear me?
Now I can. I missed all of that, what you just showed me.
I'm sorry. It's because it disconnected. It
It's
reconnected.
okay. I don't know
truck.
if you just went out of Wi-Fi or, do you think you were talking inside the truck and that's why I couldn't hear you?
Yeah. Yeah, my truck stayed connected.
If you disconnect Bluetooth, we can try that again and we'll just cut out everything.
Okay. How do we do that? Hang on.
You just go to your top pull down screen. You should be able to go off of Bluetooth. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I don't have Okay. Now I don't quite have picture, but yep, there it is. You were. Okay. All right.
Good.
Now I've got you. Okay. Now we can try your plots again.
So, yeah, as I was saying, we have a dealer network and they trial our products, within their regions. But then here locally, I'll step out of the truck. We have plots here. We have about 2 acres, 2 acres of kind of what I'll call more intense plots where they're side by side comparisons of different varieties, and not just varieties, but also mixtures. So we do compare mixtures here as well. We've got everything from our Raised Crazy mix to our Double Play and Soil Builder Plus. Over on that side of the plots, we have a tall fescue trial going on. So we have all of the novel endophyte tall fescue varieties that are available to us on the market right now. So we have those out side by side, and that trial will continue on for a while. Been working up the plots here on this side. We have some orchard grass and then some Timothy as well that we're working with. So we, having a trial, having a show and a touch and feel trial in addition to pulling some data and information off of that is pretty critical, both for our own information and as well as just sharing it with the local community. I mean, that's something that I didn't really think about starting the business in the beginning, kind of what the local community response would be. But having these plots here has been really interesting. There are a lot of local producers that stop by and just check them out. In fact, somebody came by yesterday. He was giving me a hard time for not having a plot map readily available for him. So there's nothing like having an older farmer, older producer chastise you for something you didn't do. But anyway, he was just coming back from the cattle sale and said he didn't buy anything. But anyway, he's complaining about prices, but he wanted to stop by and check the grasses out and see how they were doing. So anyway, those things are pretty rewarding and pretty exciting when it comes to just knowledge and education about improve forage varieties, species that might not be commonly used in this area, in addition to mixtures. We can showcase all of those things here. Here at the warehouse, we don't have a livestock component. I do have that at my house. I've tried everything that we sell, I think at least once, in addition to mixtures and different combinations, and have a rotational grazing system that I can allows me to manage the livestock, to trial different products and trial different forages. So, and all of my neighbors around me in the community that I live in, they get seed at a little bit of a discounted rate. So, and they give me feedback. I kind of take over their farming operations as well. so, so I force them into using our forages, and provide me a little playground right around the house that I can get on the side by side and ride, take about a 5 mile loop and see about 10 to 15 different fields of our endurance orchard grass, for example, surge, triticale, sorghum sedans in the summer, mixtures. And what's also exciting about that is the young fellow that we just hired as a representative. He lives right down the road from me, so that was kind of cool too. It just sort of worked out that way. Anyway, so yeah,
That helps a lot. And that's a really accurate piece too. Constantly, some of the best ways for me to communicate value on a specific variety or species is when I can point to somewhere close, like within an hour, that it has been successful, and say, hey, it worked here. We've seen it here. This isn't some far away land. It's funny about that guy stopping by, which I noticed in the past when I've been at the warehouse, where people will show up, and it surprises me because I always think of you guys as like a DC more so than really a retail hub. And you're not necessarily a retail hub, but that is available. If anybody's close to Rome and wanted to go, they can just swing through there and pick theirs up, and it makes it easy for everybody. And then of course you've got guys like us out here in the far reaches of the wilderness, as far as you're concerned, over there in Georgia. And I had a kid the other day that was calling wanting to order 250 pounds of seed, and he was like, "Oh, and what's the shipping going to be on that?" And I said, "Aren't you like an hour from here? Just drive down here and get it. I'll get it to my house. Otherwise, you could get it drop shipped from Josh and spend that. We don't need to have the conversation if that's what we're doing." I said, "I'm not passing that cost on to you. You are my customer. Come pick it up when it comes in. I'll let you know when." And
yeah,
he was of course very excited about that. But that opportunity or that option, and not that I need to go off on my thing, but guys, it's well worth having somewhere to store a little seed so that you have something on hand, or can at least store seed to get a better shipping rate on getting your orders in if they're small like that for a customer. I think last year I had to pay freight on 2 pallets from you. It wasn't many. I really tried to avoid that.
yeah. Well, and I mean, even for producers, I mean, seed dealers as well, but also producers having a good, safe place to store seed. You think that would go without saying, but honestly, it doesn't. And especially in the Southeast, because what happens when we have an intention to plant something, and then what happens? It gets dry, and then it's a month or 2 months later before we can actually get out there and plant it. We didn't start getting adequate moisture for seeding. Winter annuals until November here. So if you had an intention of getting that in the ground mid-September and the conditions weren't right, we may not have what you want available in November when it does start raining. So I think that's important to think about, storage and seed storage, keeping seed on hand. I know on my farm, I keep seed around, and I have a pretty good shop to store it in, and pretty safe place. But I keep seed around for just where I'm rut up the fields, or where I'm grazing hay or anything, or not grazing it, where I'm feeding hay. I can repair those areas, and I don't know. It's just good to have a good, safe place to store seed um, year round. So, because of the variable conditions and the constant opportunities we have for repairing perennial pastures from damage that's incurred.
Oh, 100%. On that note, slightly related, on the repairing pastures, and this is getting a little bit further down sidetracks than I was planning to go today, but like, what do you think of the aerators and stuff that, I stumbled across an ad last night and was looking at again, I think it was the Ranch Works brand, but was looking at these aerators again, talking about to repair pastures. Have you seen any kind of advantage to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the aerators in general will solve a problem that exists that also has some other solutions. If you have good diversity in your pasture and you have good rest and rotation, then the surface compaction that's fixed by aeration maybe won't exist. Having said that, nobody's a perfect manager. So times when there is some surface compaction, and especially on heavy red clay ground, or if it's an area that maybe you did feed some hay, or maybe you stockpiled some forage and grazed a little later than you wanted to into the winter and kind of pugged up the ground and things like that and created some surface compaction. Yeah, I don't have a problem with using those. I think it's not a bad idea. But the goal should always be to get your forage to a place where um, it can kind of heal some damage through some rest and rotation. But again, they have their place. Anyone who says they're continuous no-till or rotational grazing, I mean, anyone who says that and doesn't admit that at times you're going to get some compaction, again, especially on red clay ground, I think it's worth admitting, like, hey, we're going to get some compaction and we need to have a solution for it.
Last night, Dad and I were talking about the ground up in Maryland on one of the around the farms that we were on before we moved down here, which was a red shale essentially. It was not much in
Yeah.
the way of topsoil, and they were talking about the price of renting it, and it's still really cheap. And he was like, they were kind of, my dad and older brother were being a little sarcastic about it not being that good. And I'm like, no, that's money making ground right there. That stuff will grow some grass like nobody's business if you can manage it. And that was what Dad piped up then. He was like, yeah, you're exactly right. If you can get on it at the right times, it really will kick off some forage. And it's very true. So
Yeah.
what would you say if I was to ask you, like, if looking back, because I know having this conversation will kind of bring back like the journey, and I think the journey is the whole thing, man. And it's been so cool for me because I've been a part of it to what we figured out yesterday, where hey, this has been 10 years that I've had control of Wet Meadow Seeds from when, Dad kind of was like, hey, run with this. I'm not chasing business. I'm not doing that anymore. So tell me what you would call like a success story, whether it's for you, for a customer. What would you consider a success story? What you've already built, because you've built what you've done is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing to acknowledge is the fact that I haven't done it. It's been done through the work and the hands and the minds of a lot of really, really good people. And I'm not just being humble in saying that. I'm being truthful. That's the reality. Is for those of you who have met me and know me and are close to me, I'm not the most talented person out there. I don't always keep the best schedule. I don't wake up and sometimes I just have cinnamon toast crunch in the morning. I don't eat a 5-course breakfast and wake up with a champion's brain. I just don't. It's just not who I am. But what I do recognize and what I think is what everyone should recognize is talents within other people. And if you can bring those together and you can connect talented people and deploy them and give them the freedom to use those talents, business grows. Business grows and develops, and you also have a lot of fun. And that's what we've done. We've had a lot of fun here. We enjoy what we do. There's some really really good people on board. We have had some really really outstanding people on board in the past. And they've contributed to the business, and so they've moved on, and that's been okay too. That's probably one thing. I used to see losing an employee as a failure. I guess as things progress and I move on, I realize some of the things that I should have maybe done different for some employees in certain situations. But then I think about the success that they've helped us and our customers achieve by contributing, and then also recognizing, it's time to move on. So yeah, I think it has to be the success story. Well, this organization is the people who helped continue to push me and keep me motivated when there are many times where it felt like we were kind of going backwards, especially in a seasonal business. There are days where you're wondering, why is no one calling? Why does no one, did everyone forget about us? Those types thoughts creep into your mind. And in reality, it's just January and there are limited opportunities to seed things. And And so, yeah, that's being able to manage those down times and manage the slow times to plan for the busy times. Using those to plan for the busy times, that was also another critical thing that I've learned and had to learn over time. So yeah, maybe that answered your question. I don't know, but yeah, success was definitely the people involved, and even these two new younger guys that have just started within the past couple of weeks. They're going to bring some talent to the table. Ethan in the office there is using AI to help develop a newsletter and working on, and I that's something I don't know anything about. To be honest with you, I don't really care to know much about. So, and maybe at my age, I'm going to be around for a while in this career, so maybe I'm going to be forced to learn it. But seeing what these younger guys are already bringing to the table, I know that the next generation of contributors to Southeast Agro Seeds is already, they're in place and ready to go. So, yeah, I'm excited about the future. But those are the successes of the company. Are you can't talk about the success without referencing the people.
I love that. And it's very true. And you hit some really high points I don't even need to add into. The only thing I'll touch, which I think is a little funny, you saying about learning your AI stuff and this. That's where you have different roles at this point where some of the stuff that I'm having to try to figure out as I'm in this season for myself is I'm over here going, dang, I wish I was big enough to not have to deal with this stuff. And then anyway, it just makes me laugh a little bit hearing you say that because that's my reaction is if I could delegate this, I would. And I'm not knocking AI at all, but there's also a downside to it, especially when it comes to connecting with people as far as, the information from it's great. It's like Google on steroids, right? But you have to fact check it yourself instead of it being a link to a university article. It just generates a whole bunch of information, so you got to go back and double check it. So it kind of runs back and forth on it's more valuable than not, but it also is one of those things that if I was able to say, hey man, you take care of this for me, I would be happy with that too. So but yeah, some really really good points. And again, going back to me having the privilege of being part of this all the way from, and I won't name names because you've been gracious enough not to, but your early dealer rep person that would help take care of dealers and back before your bookkeeping was even done in house. Like all of these things there's a lot of people that went into, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of time, a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of where Southeast Agro Seeds is, even from my perspective, to that extent, and in the small part I played in being your way the heck out here person. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I should also say that a lot of those people have gone on to do better, bigger and better things. They've moved on and continued on with their careers and realizing and embracing the fact that early on, I probably not just lack of growth. I was probably part of the reason for the lack of growth and for the lack of the business being just as good as it could be, for the individuals that were buying early on, and really had, our customers had to weather some storms as well, in terms of getting everything kind of set up and structured in a way that we could grow and still provide good service. That has been a challenge.
what do you think producers often don't understand about forage? Where do you think the biggest gap is?
The mentality of you can't do that here. I mean, you hear people saying that, well, it can't be done here, but I think they think there are a limited number of forages that can be produced in a given area and in a given system. And maybe there are definitely limits, right? I mean, but when we introduce things like Festalolium, for example, Mahulena, just to pick on a couple of products, Festalolium. When we talk about things like forage plantain, using spring peas versus winter peas versus cow peas, I think that I see the wheels turning and the minds expanding and understanding that, this is not limitless, but there are less limits than maybe we thought. Those are all things that we've grown within, either at the warehouse here or within a few miles. I mean, those are forages that we're growing here locally. I think fully embracing and understanding diversity in perennial pastures, cool season perennial pastures. That's been one of my challenge points. There there is a cool season perennial pasture will always be limited if it doesn't have diversity. If we're talking about fescue monocultures or even, fescue orchard grass, which is not a monoculture, but it's pretty close. If we're not incorporating some alternative grasses, some grasses that expand out the production window, and growth curve, or really if we're not incorporating legumes and forbs into that pasture, there are limitations. And again, I understand some of the management constraints of wanting to use, well, what about the weeds and broadleaf herbicides and things like that? I think those things, there's a way to manage, without deploying some of those resources. Keep your diversity, keep your good, healthy, productive pasture. There are ways to do that, and I think that limits a lot of people. They think that they have to manage a certain way. Monocultures are definitely easier to manage from a program standpoint, but there's a lot of opportunity in cool season perennial pastures when we consider diversity.
And those are some really good species you're talking about being added. You have, and I don't know if you remember this, but we had a picture in a book of the Southern Beefmaster that Tim sells or did used to sell. And that one was phenomenal down here. We had 10 really good years out of it. And what was funny is the Bar Optima E34 tall fescue, it wouldn't kill. It took 2 years of corn on corn to get that gone out of that field. It kept coming back year after year for the first couple of years, and I believe it didn't come back on the third spring after we took that field out, and it just got so weed heavy. But if you get 5 really good years, really productive years on a dairy farm where you're kind of, to be entirely fair, it was the close field. It was the field that got beat up. It was a really, really good stand of grass. So I just wanted to jump in on that because that my favorite term that I like to throw at our customers is agronomically diverse. It just makes me sound smart, I think, and that's why I say it a lot. But it's very true. Give yourself the options. Yesterday, I had a great call with a guy that had planted Nitro Boost, and he was like, and how much nitrogen should I be getting from that? We got into a conversation. I think I had to about talk the man into putting any fertilizer on his corn. So
yeah.
Well,
and to your point, one thing that's worth mentioning too is like that Southern Beefmaster, which had, orchard grass or fescue orchard grass and the red and white clovers. It's a lot like our balancer mix now, but we're always concerned in the South, hot, dry summers. We're concerned about longevity on these cool season perennials. But my challenge and my charge would be that, we can isolate and look at how long will that novel endophyte tall fescue survive. But I assure you that we can get extended life out of it if we couple it with a legume. So, we're constantly concerned about survivability of these novel fescue varieties and how will they hold up. But if we couple those with a legume, all of a sudden we're spoon feeding a small amount of nitrogen throughout its entire life. We're keeping it healthier through the winter. We're keeping it healthier through the summer. It's less disease prone because of the diversity. And so when we get concerned about novel endophyte or any perennial grass longevity, if we're not coupling it with a legume, we're leaving some on the table.
That's yeah, I 100% agree with that. We're pushing towards the top of the hour, so we'll wrap a little quicker. I left a couple questions out there. Give us some closing thoughts for dealers rolling into 26, whether they're your dealers or other people listening to this podcast that might be selling seed. What should we be looking at with the market doing what it's doing as far as cattle prices, the price of the price of on the boards makes me think that even with high calves, the forward-looking farmers might be starting to figure out, hey, we want to grow something this year and just feed background some calves or do something here on our place. What's your thoughts? What advice do you have for guys like me trying to move through this year and navigate kind of a weird market compared to normal?
Well, I won't pretend to be an economist when it comes to livestock. So, but you get paid for gain, you get paid for pounds of gain, and if you can grow the forage on your own farm, or I'll eliminate forage and just say if you can grow the feed on your own farm, the economics of doing that versus having to buy it in a bulk bin or buy feed from a neighbor, economically the numbers always work out better if you can grow the feed on your own farm. And especially if you're optimizing that production and you're looking at, these annuals and perennials, and you have a good forage rotation, then you can make decisions. If you have feed inventory and the ability to grow feed, then you can make decisions of what to do in the cattle market, with the cattle market. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing, is that ability to grow feed, to grow inventory, to have the inventory either on hand or, like I said, the ability to quickly grow it. We have a lot of operations that are focused on the cattle, and not focused on the forage. The cattle are a byproduct. They're a very tasty byproduct, but they're a byproduct of you know what I mean. The forage production system is what drives that. Now, there are plenty of people who don't have very good forage production systems, but they're very good at trading cattle. And that, if you want to learn how to do that, that could be a good thing too. That could be a lucrative thing. But in our world, if we're talking about really capitalizing on the opportunity to be a good forage producer and a forage manager, there's opportunity in the market regardless of where the cattle prices are. Danced around that one a little bit,
100%
honestly,
agree.
but that's just where I'm at with it. I still feel like so many operations need to focus on forages, and I think it's tempting to take the focus off of forages when cattle prices are where they are.
Well, and I had a great conversation with a customer friend. Customers turn into friends sometimes, and it's always a good thing when that happens. And I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and a farm he works with they wound up just overwintering more cattle than they were anticipating, and now he's scrambling for forage to make sure they're all fed. And that's something that, with proper planning, with all those things, the money's there regardless of when you sell beef. At this point, you're making money, and especially if you don't have to throw that feed scoop in front of her, to your point, which I absolutely love where you went with that. And it also answered the question of what should producers be doing, because you took care of dealers and producers all in the same fell swoop. What do we have to look forward to in the summer annual realm this year? What are you thinking on? We're gonna be in good shape on seed in stock, all those things for
Yes, seed
the
supply.
spring and summer growing season.
Sure, seed supply is solid. As far as warm season perennials, some things like Bermuda grass are still challenged. Our AU grazer Lespedeza production is just down on that. That's sort of still a novelty product. Not broad use of that product, but it's the seed supply is just not there. But in terms of forage sorghums, we have really exciting the 76A, the Fiber Pro 76 that was gone and then now it's back. So that's the aphid tolerant variety. That's a full season BMR dwarf, checks all the boxes. Honestly, it's a very, very exciting product. And we've had it in the past, and then production failures and miscommunications on the Texas production side. And then now that's back again this year. So we have our Aphidax line with the heavyweight and the payload. Those two products have been tough to beat in combination with each other. We'll be running some of those in our mixtures as well. Overall, the lineup is strong. The Energy Pro 93, the Energy Pro 932. Yeah, those are.
And I had so much good feedback over the 93 this year. I think out of all the growers so far, all but one of them has said that they're planting more, and the other one goes, "I got too much feed this year. You need to buy any hay."
That's
So
funny.
that was the feedback I got. And I think we had him go in and he put down, what did he hit it with? 50 units of nitrogen and 15 pounds of sulfur.
Okay.
To get that off and going. And the sulfur is just so important there for root development. And I know we try not to get too far down the rabbit holes on recommending that sometimes, but we get those questions quite often.
Well, yeah, and that's yeah, you're right. There's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it is true that if we don't have some knowledge and understanding of how to grow the forage products that we're selling, then that doesn't speak very well for us as consultants and folks who are trying to help other people grow. So yeah, we've got to know those things. So that's noteworthy right there, just to think about. You can't just say, well, talk to your fertilizer guy, because a lot of these folks don't have a good fertilizer guy to reach out to.
Well, and that goes to along the same lines, and we didn't really get into the difference in independent dealers and a retail store, just, that has a product on the shelf. But
Yeah.
when you think about it, that's almost similar anymore to, unless they have someone on staff. I'm starting to see more and more fertilizer companies being no different as far as just throwing something in the truck and putting it out to say so. We talk about there's so many things, nutrient removal with the grasses and all those things. They don't have a clue, because what they're used to and accustomed to, especially, and I'm not trying to pick on us down here in the Southeast, but it's not the primary thing, between producers not being as aggressive about it as maybe they are with the dairy guys up in the Midwest and the Northeast and all those places. But just having that down here where it is row crops, we've got everything from cotton to tall fescue grown within a mile up here on our road. Tobacco is grown
Right.
in our county. We have all of that stuff. It's very diverse on what we're growing, but there's not a huge amount of primary focus on forage production. And therefore, the guys that work in a lot of these fertilizer companies are not as in tune with the needs to make sure it's successful. They're going to glance in a book and be like, oh, let's put out our NPK and we're good to go. And there's so much more to it.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more to it. And I think there are some, fertilizer groups and companies that are trying to speak to that for sure. But yeah, it is challenging. It's a challenging part of, and we can't do it. We can't grow good forage, optimize production without fertilizer options. I don't want to get into the argument of commercial versus poultry litter versus dairy slurry, whatever, organic. Those things aside, highly productive forages require nutrients. That's without a doubt, and that you can't leave that behind and say, well, my good seed from Jacob is gonna overcome my lack of nutrients. That's just not the case.
Don't sell fertilizer, and we don't sell bags of rain.
That's right.
And that's very accurate. To that point on the manure, there's so much value in that, but you don't always see it. And then you have the fact that it takes time. For example, chicken litter, you're looking at a fair amount of nitrogen production in it, but you are only going to get 25% of that in that first 6 months or so after it's put down. So yeah, you're going to get a couple pounds, but it's going to be a couple pounds along. It's not a couple pounds of, boom, I put out 3 tons, I've got 100 pounds of nitrogen out there. No, you don't. You've got 25 pounds of nitrogen out there. So again, not trying to go down that path too much.
Yeah.
With the seed man here, but very, very much opportunities around that for dealers who are providing value for their customers, is helping them through that part of the decision making. And I had a second thought on that nutrient removal, or not the nutrient removal, but before I went off on my other tangent, I had a different thought I wanted to add, but I guess I'll pass that by, Josh, because I can't think of what it was. Regenerative ag. We kind of talked about all the diversity. Your thoughts, and then has it affected Southeast? Have we gotten more business, or what do we have with that? What are your thoughts on it? You've got the carbon cowboys, you've got your white oak guy down there that lives in that area, or an hour or something, right? Am I right on that?
No, it's
Anyway,
quite a
I'm
bit
just
further
curious.
south than that.
Okay.
We may not have enough time to talk about that one. I mean, it's
We
so it's what here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say about it. So we had I was at the American Forage and Grassland Conference last week, Forage and Grassland Council Conference in North Carolina. Fantastic conference, by the way. And if anybody who sees this is not connected to that group, it's a great group to be connected with. Young scientists and researchers, and some old scientists and researchers that come together to present new information. We had some sessions on regenerative ag and had a really good panel discussion. And Dr. Gates, who's on our team, was involved in that. And I definitely think the best way, and I'll use some of his language, but the best way to phrase it is that we, regardless of what we call it, call it regenerative ag, call it progressive ag, or call it just smart business. We do need to look at everything as a systems approach. So we have to have the whole system, and if input costs are so high that that it doesn't allow for profitability, and I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying as a scenario, then we need to look at reducing inputs. If output is not high enough to allow for profitability, then we need to look at outputs. And most likely we need to look at both of those things. So I think, as with anything, you have to weigh the pros and cons of some of the inputs that are available to us. But just to suggest that we go cold turkey, no inputs, I think that's not a fair way to look at it. That's not a fair thing to do. But I do think the discussion that starts with, regenerative ag, the discussion of responsibly using the land, reducing inputs, things like that are good. But we definitely can't have those discussions without considering output and considering the production side. So that's what I would say about it for now, is that and that's not just a political answer. I believe those things. We have a lot of really, really good tools that are available to us in agriculture. And just like the conversation we had about fertilizer, to say that, we're vehemently opposed to synthetic commercial fertilizers without considering what that cost will be to not use those, and what some of our limitations and challenges may be. I think that's a bit blind to say that we can just go cold turkey, no inputs. We do
I
need these
think
inputs,
100%.
but we could utilize them more efficiently.
Very accurate. And a lot of the ways to do that is just stay accurate with your soil testing. Let's, make more of an effort to do that. Most extension services, they'll either do it for you or they'll do it cheap enough. And if your fertilizer company is sporting enough or you spend enough money with them, they'll pull them for you.
There you go.
Or get your independent dealer to do it. I have 2 probes sitting over here behind me. With that said, I do agree with you. I think it's a balance. There's a reason we went to synthetic fertilizers to start with, because they work, because they're quick acting. There's a reason that they don't do things the way they did 200 years ago, but there's value in what they did 200 years ago. Striking that balance, to your point, I think needs to happen. One of the big things they do with that you see the Carbon Cowboys videos, and I enjoy watching them because I learn stuff soil wise, biology wise. I feel like I learn stuff from the stuff that they do. Same with the White Oaks gentleman. I forget his name. I know you mentioned it, but I don't know it. But I watch every video he puts out because I think it's interesting, it's fascinating, and I think there's value to it. And he's a great marketer. I mean, a great marketer. With that said, they're talking about flash grazing. That's how they're able to get a field cleared and stomped, is their flash grazing. I remember doing that by accident as a kid. I made the paddock too small. Cows got out. I got in trouble. Like you're just fencing them tight and making them eat it. And it's not a bad thing. If you got good grass, it sustains it, but you've got to keep them moving as well, which is the entire point of what they're doing. So all we're doing is recycling the verbiage from 1990 saying, go back to intensive grazing, And that's not a bad thing, but you got to know how to work it in a system. And then the Southeast is a different type of system where if you don't have an annual in the summer, you need to be rotational grazing so you can rest those pastures up the way you need to. Otherwise, you're going to kill them.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Am I wrong?
Roger was talking, well, no, I don't think so. Dr. Gates was talking about the other day about, changing the phrase rotational grazing to rotational rest, which basically affords more attention. Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is, right? It's rotational rest. So, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's the way we need to be thinking about rotation. So,